Okay, welcome back. This is part 2 of my series on the SBA loans for small businesses for coronavirus. So we're going with the same backdrop here, sunny California, for you today, because if you recall my first video on this, I believe Sunday night, that's where I was. So I talked about how they've come out with the new Paycheck Protection Program for small businesses. And there's been a lot of interest in that over the last few days, and I've had people reach out. So last night, after I went home from the office, I spent about 2.5 hours reading through legal posts, blog posts, and the 440-page CARES Act itself. So the CARES Act is the coronavirus. It's what they named the Relief Act, Coronavirus something Relief Act. So if you hear people talking about here I've got it over here, the CARES Act, it's the Coronavirus Relief Act that Congress passed. And so Section 1102 of that act is, if you can see, I found the original act. That's the Paycheck Protection Program. And so I did a bunch of looking at the SBA website last night, and basically the application for the Paycheck Protection Program is not on there yet. So Washington Post had an article yesterday that the Treasury Secretary said he thinks it will be available by Friday of this week. I assume he meant Friday this week. That was yesterday on Monday. But as far as I can tell, there's no application for the Paycheck Protection Program on there yet. And this is the great one that you've maybe heard me talk about, where you can use the funds for up to 8 weeks of payroll expenses to pay your employees, or pay yourself if you're a sole proprietor, independent contractor, and for covered expenses such as rent. So they use, one thing to know about is what's the covered period. So the Act defines the covered period, meaning the period you can start having these funds cover your losses, let's say, is from February 15th, 2020 to June 30th, 2020. So Congress basically knows the coronavirus is disrupting a lot of small businesses. So they're saying, from what I can tell reading the act, you can pick your 8-week period during that time. So June 30th, 2020. And in terms of the loan, you can use it for more than 8 weeks, but what I was focusing on is a part that can be forgiven is that 8-week period, so roughly 2 months within there. But these Paycheck Protection Program program loans are going to be from local lenders, and they aren't set up yet, from what I can tell, to lend that money. So again, you can watch my first video on some of the things you can use it for, but to qualify, you got to be a small business, 500 or less employees, and then you can be a sole proprietorship, independent contractor, or self-employed individual. So that's really big. And they're going to base your payroll on the prior year period, what you had for payroll. So the other thing is you gotta be in business this year when it happened. And they're saying part of the lending thing is they're gonna consider whether the borrower was in operation on February 15th, 2020 of this year. So there's a lot of details in here, and if you want, I'll maybe go through it detail by detail, but today I want to do the big overview, and then if you have additional questions you can contact my office. But basically you can use it for payroll costs, group health care costs, employee salaries, rent, utilities, those are all covered under here. So you want to make sure if you get the loan, you're using it for those purposes. Now, to get the loan, you have to make a good faith certification that the uncertainty of current economic conditions makes necessary the loan request to support the ongoing operations. And they're waiving the fee. The administrator shall collect no fee on this. And the requirement that you have to be unable to obtain credit elsewhere is waived under this section, and no personal guarantee shall be required for the covered loan. And the interest rate shall bear an interest rate not to exceed 4%. So that's the really good part of the Paycheck Protection program. Now, I think a lot of small businesses are going to want to apply for that loan, but like I said, I cannot find the application on the SBA website as of midnight last night when I was looking. So I think you're going to need to give it a few days, and it may not be, they're going to put information there, but they're saying they're using local lenders, so it may be different than the other loan. Now, here's the other loan that's available right now, and this is where it gets confusing. Congress also appropriated money for the economic injury disaster loans and emergency economic injury grants. So that money is available now, and the application is on the SBA website. So if you go to their website, at the very top you see like a COVID-19, and it talks about this loan. And the shorthand is EIDL loan, Economic Injury Disaster Loan. So this loan is through the SBA. So the Paycheck Protection Program, Congress set aside like $350 billion for that, but they put some money in the pot for this. And these loans existed before. I was not as familiar with them, but for like a disaster, a hurricane, it was designed for the SBA to lend directly and get those funds out. And they're available now for this disaster. So if you're a small business and you're facing the cash crunch right now, and you're trying to scramble to cover payroll, expenses, etc., you might want to apply for the EIDL loan now, because the application is open and the funds come directly from the SBA. And when I walked through this application, it's really it's less complex than I thought. It's about 3 pages. You got to put in information about your business, your gross revenues last year, your tax ID, filing information, entity information, and then it asks you if you want to access up to a $10,000 advance. And if so, they ask you to put your checking information right in there for your business, and they say it may be available within 3 days of applying for the SBA Economic Injury Disaster Loan. So again, those funds, it appears, are going to come much faster than the PPP, the Paycheck Protection Program Act. So if you need the cash early, I would look into that program now, and then look into the Paycheck Protection Program Act long term. And the way I understand it, I'm going to put a link to this, but the best thing I found is the U.S. Senate Small Business and Entrepreneurship Committee came out with a FAQ on all of this. And I like that because it's right from the U.S. Senate, the people that wrote the bill. And what they say is, who is eligible for the Economic Emergency Injury Act? Grant. Those eligible for an EIDL and who have been in operation since January 31st, 2020, when the public health crisis was announced. So that's the key date they're going back to. You had to be in operation as of January 31, 2020. If you opened a business after that date, it's not going to work. But if you had a business going before January 31, and the overview of these grants is they provide an emergency advance of up to $10,000 to small businesses and private nonprofits harmed by COVID-19 within 3 days of applying to the SBA. To access the advance, you first apply for the EIDL and then request the advance. And here's another key thing. The advance does not need to be repaid under any circumstance. It may be used to keep employees on payroll, to pay for sick leave, meet increased production costs due to supply chain disruptions, or pay business obligations, including debts, rent, and mortgage payments. So again, if you're a small business like a restaurant, a bar, many small businesses, a hair salon, and you're in a cash crunch, this is the one you might want to look to just to get you through the next couple weeks until you can get your PPP, Paycheck Protection Program, loan application in. And it appears to me, now don't hold me to this because it's all very new and developing, but they act like you could roll over the EIDL into the PPP program. And then, the way I read it, you could get that, if you got that up to $10,000, you could make that part of the 8 weeks you apply for forgiveness under the PPP. And so if I were looking at it, if I were you, that's what I would look at doing if you need the cash this week or soon. If you have time to wait, maybe you just want to wait for the PPP application to come out Friday or later, talk to your lender. But if you really need the cash, the EIDL sounds like it's going to be faster. And again, who's it eligible for? Sole proprietorships with or without employees, independent contractors, cooperatives and employee-owned businesses, and tribal small businesses. Again, the following with 500 or less employees. So even the great thing here is a nonprofit can apply for this. So here's another question. How long are emergency economic injury grants available? From January 31st to December 31st, 2020. The grants are backdated to January 31st to allow those who have already applied for EIDLs to be eligible to also receive a grant. So they're making the window open till December 31, 2020 of this year. So, if you're making it so far and aren't sure, you do have some time. But again, this application is available and not that complex if you wanted to get it going. Now here's the final key takeaway for today. They asked this question specifically: if I get an EIDL and or an emergency economic injury grant, can I get a PPP loan? And they say here, this is from the Senate Small Business Committee, whether you've already received an EIDL unrelated to COVID-19. So let's say you had, a hurricane last fall and you got some other EIDL, or you receive a COVID-19 related EIDL, which is what I'm talking about today, the coronavirus EIDL, and or emergency grant between January 31, 2020 and June 30, 2020, you may also apply for a PPP loan. So if you do this application before June 30th of this year, they're saying you can still apply for the PPP loan, because if you think about a large business, this goes up to 500 employees. So if you have 400 employees, this grant and advance probably isn't going to last very long, right? But for a smaller business, it could be some decent money to get them through the crash crunch. And it says here, if you ultimately receive a PPP loan or refinance an EIDL into a PPP loan, and again, apologies for the abbreviations, but that's the Paycheck Protection Program, any advance amount received under the Emergency Economic Injury Grant Program would be subtracted from the amount forgiven in the PPP. So you can't double dip. That's where you got to focus on the 8 weeks total you can get of loan forgiveness. But if you get the cash advance first, okay, and then you go apply for the PPP, they're going to deduct that amount from the PPP. So that's fine. Just be aware that it's not this plus this. It's one total, the way I read the act, of that 8-week loan forgiveness. And if you get the EIDL, you can probably get it going and get it quicker. And then if I were you, I would look at refinancing refinancing it into a PPP loan to make sure you qualify for that forgiveness under the 8-week period. So then it says, however, you cannot use your EIDL for the same purpose as your PPP loan. For example, if you use your EIDL to cover payroll for certain workers in April, you cannot use PPP for payroll for those same workers in April, although you could use it for payroll in March or for different workers in April. So again, the way I read that, they're saying you can't, get the EIDL money and say I'm covering 2 weeks of payroll in April and then apply for the PPP for the same 2 weeks in April. But you can cover different periods with them, and you can include it. What I would do is try to refinance the EIDL into the PPP and then pick your 8-week period total that you want to apply for loan forgiveness at the end. So basically, I wanted to get this video out today, and I'm going to put the link to the Senate Small Business handout here. And I don't want to keep this, I know we're live right now, and thank you to those who are joining us live. If you have a question while I'm still going, you can type it in the box. But today I want to keep this one not super long, and I plan to do another one about what I found on the loan forgiveness provisions of the CARES Act. And so, thank you. Thanks for watching. I'm trying to get the information out there because I just feel a lot of small businesses don't even know where to begin with this, and they're the ones who need this cash right now. But the Senate Small Business handout, okay, I'm going to post the link here, and they kind of ask you some questions you can walk through yourself. Like, it says, do you need capital to cover the cost of retaining employees? Then the Paycheck Protection Program may be right for you. Or, do you need a quick infusion of a smaller amount of cash to cover you right now? You might want to look into an emergency economic injury grant. So it kind of asks some good questions. I thought was the best resource I found that cuts down on the legalese. Because I read a bunch of law firm blogs and articles. Some fancy law firms wrote very good legal analysis of this. But to be honest, it's very dense and not the most user-friendly. So I'm going to post the link to this Senate U.S. Small Business and Entrepreneurship Committee guide on here, and I think you should walk through those questions on there and see which ones apply for you. And let's say you have a current, they even cover this, let's say you have a current SBA loan. It says to ease your fears about keeping up with payments on your current SBA loan, the Small Business Debt Relief Program could help you. Or, finally, just some quality free counseling to help you navigate this economic time. And then they have a list of resource partners to help you. So, anyway, take a look at that guideline. And they've got a whole section on the PPP program. But if you're a small business right now and you're just looking at which one to do, I would start at looking at this. And then think about your cash flow needs in, the next week or two, maybe 3 weeks. I'm hearing different things amongst the bloggers and tax practitioners about, when they really think that application is going to be available for the PPP, the Paycheck Protection Program Act. So anyway, I would run through this and take a look at it, and then I would go to the SBA website and look at the economic injury application. It's pretty simple, and you can page through it a little bit without submitting it if you want. And then think about your cash flow needs and what you need right now. So there's a lot to the CARES Act, 440 pages. There's 3 different sections, one about the Paycheck Protection Program, another about the Economic Injury Program, and then there's a third about how the loan forgiveness works. And my takeaway, I'll try to drill down on some of those in the future, But my takeaway is, if you use the loan for anything, keep good records. If you write a rent check, make a copy of it. Payroll, keep a copy of it. Because when they get to this loan forgiveness part, you want to have your 8-week period ready to go to submit and try to get that loan forgiveness for the 8-week period. So that's today, kind of the big overview on the takeaways I found. Just think in your head, okay, there's 2 programs. We've got the Paycheck Protection Program Act, and applications aren't open yet, and we've got the Economic Injury Disaster Loan, and that's available through the SBA on their website now. So that's all I'm going to cover for this, because we've already gone 20 minutes today, and thanks for everyone who joined. If you have a comment or question, you can post it if you watch this later on the video, and I'll try to work it into a future video on the topic or do the research and get back to it. I do have to get to meeting with other clients and matters today, so I'm going to end it for today and try to be back on with a part 3 in the near future. So thanks for watching, and stay safe, definitely, be well, and we'll see you next time.